The carriage lurched to a halt, and Veda Ashford's breath caught in her throat. She had been watching him for the past 30 minutes through lowered lashes. This stranger whose private carriage she had somehow ended up inside. This man who hadn't spoken a single word since the vehicle began its journey toward whatever grand destination awaited. Malachi Finch had promised her this would be simple. Sit quietly. Say nothing. Arrive at the country house party as a gentleman's guest, and her family's debts would be forgiven. He hadn't mentioned the gentleman would be terrifying. The man across from her sat with the stillness of a predator at rest, his dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, beautiful and utterly cold. His gray eyes had assessed her once when she'd climbed into the carriage, a single sweeping glance that catalogued every thread of her borrowed dress, every nervous tremor of her gloved hands. Then he had looked away, dismissing her as thoroughly as one might dismiss a piece of luggage. Now, as the carriage settled and the sounds of arrival filtered through the velvet curtains, footsteps on gravel, the murmur of servants, distant strains of music, the stranger finally moved. He leaned toward the window, his jaw tight, and Vida heard him speak for the first time. "She cannot be my bride," he murmured, the words barely audible, rough with something that sounded almost like anguish. "Whatever arrangement grandmother has made, I will not—" The carriage door swung open. Light flooded the interior, golden and merciless, illuminating Vida like an actress thrust onto an unexpected stage. A footman in immaculate livery stood at attention. Beyond him, she glimpsed a sprawling country estate, blazing with candlelight, and gathered before its entrance what appeared to be half the aristocracy of England, all of them staring directly at her. "Your Grace," the footman said, addressing the stranger, "the guests have assembled. Shall I announce—" "Not yet." The stranger's voice cut like a blade. His gray eyes snapped to Veda, and in them she saw confusion, followed swiftly by cold fury. "Who are you?" Her mouth went dry. My name is Veda Ashford. Mr. Finch arranged for me to—" "Finch?" The name emerged as a curse. "Of course. Malachi Finch and his endless schemes." "Your Grace?" The footman shifted uncertainly. "The Dowager Duchess is waiting. She's most eager to meet your companion." The word landed like a stone in still water. Vida watched the stranger's jaw clench, watched him glance toward the assembled crowd. "She thinks I've brought a prospective bride," he said flatly. "That's why she gathered everyone tonight. She thinks she's won." "I don't understand," Veda whispered. "Mr. Finch said I was to attend a party. He never mentioned—" "No, he wouldn't have." The stranger laughed, a hollow sound. "He wouldn't have told you that you've just become a pawn in a war between myself and my grandmother." The world tilted sideways. Vida gripped the seat's edge. "That's impossible. I'm no one. I'm a merchant's daughter from Whitmore. I don't even know who you are." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or grim amusement. "You climbed into a private carriage bearing the Ravenswood crest without knowing whose carriage it was?" Ravenswood. The name crashed through her awareness like thunder. Everyone knew the Ravenswood name. Everyone knew the Duke of Thornhurst, the most eligible and most elusive bachelor in England, whose grandmother had reportedly launched a campaign to see him married before the year's end. She was sitting across from the Duke of Thornhurst, and half of London's elite believed she was his intended bride. "Oh God," she breathed. "Your eloquence is noted." The Duke rose to his full height and straightened his coat. "Unfortunately, Miss Ashford, we no longer have the luxury of confusion. In approximately 30 seconds, you and I will step out of this carriage together in front of everyone who matters in English society. I can't. This is a mistake." "Yes, it is." His voice dropped to a murmur. "But it's a mistake we're both trapped in now. So here is what will happen." He extended his hand toward her. "You will take my arm. You will smile. You will say absolutely nothing until we are somewhere private, and I can determine exactly how Malachi Finch has managed to ruin both our lives in a single evening." Veda stared at his outstretched hand. Outside, the crowd's murmuring had grown louder. "And if I refuse?" she asked. The Duke's smile was a razor wrapped in silk. "Then you walk back to Whitmore alone, tonight, with no carriage and no reputation, because by morning, every scandal sheet in London will print your name alongside mine. The only question is whether the story they tell is a fairy tale or a tragedy." He wasn't threatening her. He was stating facts. Vida thought of her family, her mother's tired eyes, her brother Rafferty's mounting debts. She took the Duke's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and something passed between them. Not understanding, not trust, but a shared recognition of the trap they'd both stumbled into. "Good," he said quietly. "Now let's go face the wolves." The gravel crunched beneath Veda's slippers as she descended from the carriage on the Duke's arm, and she felt the weight of 100 gazes settle upon her. Thornhurst Manor rose before them, a magnificent sprawl of honey-colored stone and gleaming windows. But Veda barely registered its beauty. She was too aware of the whispers already beginning, the flutter of fans, the way heads bent together in clusters of speculation. Who is she? Where did she come from? "Smile," the Duke murmured without moving his lips. "You look like you're walking to your execution." "Am I not?" "Not yet. The evening is young." They had barely taken 5 steps when a woman materialized from the crowd with the speed of a hunting falcon. She was perhaps 40, with diamonds at her throat and a smile that reminded Vida of a blade being unsheathed. "Your Grace," the woman purred. "What a delightful surprise. We had no idea you were bringing a guest." "Lady Ashworth," the Duke inclined his head. "Miss Ashford arrived quite unexpectedly. A friend of my sister's, visiting from the country." The lie slipped from him with practiced ease. "How charming." Lady Ashworth's gaze raked over Veda's borrowed gown. "From the country, you say? How refreshing." The insult was wrapped in silk, but Vida felt its edges. Before she could respond, another voice cut across the moment. "Caius." The single word carried the weight of command. Vida turned to find an elderly woman approaching, silver-haired and ramrod straight, dressed in black bombazine that conveyed more authority than any crown. Her eyes were the same gray as the Duke's, but sharper, colder. The Dowager Duchess of Thornhurst, grandmother. The Duke's arm tensed beneath Vida's fingers. "I didn't expect you to greet us personally. Didn't you?" The Dowager's gaze settled on Vida. "When my grandson arrives with an unknown woman on his arm, I find I'm compelled to investigate." "You are." "Vida Ashford, Your Grace." The words came out steadier than she felt. "It's an honor to meet you." "Ashford." The Dowager repeated the name as though tasting it for poison. "I don't know any Ashfords." "My father was a merchant, Your Grace, in Whitmore." Silence fell like an axe. The Dowager's expression shifted through surprise, calculation, and finally cold amusement. "A merchant's daughter," she said softly. "Caius, you have become creative in your defiance. This isn't what you think, grandmother. No. You arrive at the gathering I've arranged specifically for you to meet suitable matches, and you bring a merchant's daughter as your companion?" The crowd had grown deathly quiet. Veda could feel the scandal spreading outward like ripples in a pond. "The circumstances are complicated," the Duke said through gritted teeth. "If we could discuss this privately—" "Oh, I think not." The Dowager's smile was sharp. "I've invited only our closest acquaintances for the first evening. Intimate, manageable." Her eyes locked onto Vida. Inescapable. She swept away, and the crowd parted before her. Vida's legs threatened to give out. I need to leave. I'll find Malachi Finch. I'll explain. Finch is gone. What? I saw his carriage departing as we arrived. He arranged this chaos and fled. The Duke's jaw was tight. Whatever he promised you, whatever debt he claimed he'd forgive, he used you as a piece in a game you didn't know you were playing. The ground seemed to shift beneath Vida's feet. Malachi Finch, gone. Vanished, leaving her stranded in a Duke's country estate, surrounded by aristocrats sharpening their knives. Why? She managed. Why would he do this? Because my grandmother has been trying to force me into marriage for 6 months. Because Finch knew I needed a distraction, and he provided one. You. I'm not a distraction. I'm a person. At the moment, Miss Ashford, you're a crisis. His hand moved to the small of her back. And we need to move before the situation deteriorates further. How could it possibly deteriorate further? As if in answer, a new figure emerged from the manor's doorway. A young woman in icy blue silk. Blonde hair arranged in perfect ringlets, sapphires glittering at her throat. She was beautiful in the way of porcelain dolls, flawless and somehow inhuman. Her gaze found the Duke, and her smile was radiant. Then her gaze found Veda, and her smile became something else entirely. Your Grace, the woman said, gliding toward them. How wonderful to see you. Her gaze slid to Veda, dismissive and cold. And who is this? Lady Honoria Vance, the Duke said, his voice carefully neutral. May I present Miss Veda Ashford, a friend of my sister's. Your sister. Lady Honoria's laugh was a tinkling cascade. How strange. Serene never mentioned any Miss Ashford to me, and we're terribly close. Perhaps Seren values some friendships more privately than others, Vida heard herself say. Lady Honoria's eyes widened, surprised that the mouse had dared to squeak. Then her smile returned, sharper than before. Perhaps she does. How? Novel. She turned to the Duke, dismissing Vida entirely. Your grandmother has seated us together at dinner, Your Grace. I do so look forward to it. She swept past them, leaving expensive perfume and unmistakable possession in her wake. Vida's stomach churned. She thinks she's going to marry you. My grandmother has made certain of it. The Duke's expression was unreadable. Lady Honoria is wealthy, connected, and unrelentingly ambitious. She's been my grandmother's preferred candidate for months. Then why am I here? He looked at her then, and for a moment his mask slipped just enough for her to see the exhaustion underneath. Because I needed to stop this. Because I can't marry her. He stopped. That doesn't matter why. What matters is that you're here now, and every person in that manor believes you're significant to me. So I'm trapped. We both are. He released her arm and stepped back. The footman will show you to a guest chamber. My sister Serene will find you shortly. Tomorrow will determine how to extract us both from this disaster. And tonight? The Duke's smile was bitter. Tonight, Miss Ashford, we survive. He turned and walked into the manor, leaving Vida alone with the stars spinning overhead and the terrible certainty that her life had just changed forever. The guest chamber was larger than Vida's entire family home. She stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to absorb the details. The four-poster bed with silk hangings, the mahogany writing desk by windows overlooking moonlit gardens, the wardrobe that could house a small family. Fresh flowers perfumed the air, and a fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Miss Ashford, a maid's voice. Lady Seren has sent me. May I enter? Yes, please. The door opened to reveal a girl, perhaps 18, with auburn hair tucked beneath a cap and kind brown eyes. I'm Tansy, miss, Lady Seren's personal maid. She asked me to bring you these. She held out clothing, a nightgown in soft cotton, a morning dress in dove gray. Lady Seren thought you might not have had time to pack, Tansy said delicately. The kindness nearly undid Vida entirely. Thank you, she whispered. Before she could say more, the door burst open, and a whirlwind in emerald silk swept into the room. You're her! The whirlwind resolved into a young woman with the Duke's dark hair, but none of his coldness. Her brown eyes sparkled with delight. You're the mysterious woman who arrived in Caius's carriage and made grandmother look like she'd swallowed a lemon. I'm Serene. Tell me everything. Vida blinked. There's nothing to tell. This is all a terrible mistake. The best adventures always are. Seren grabbed her hands. Tansy, you may go. I need to interrogate our guest properly. The maid departed, and Seren pulled Vida toward a settee by the fire. Now, Seren said, her expression suddenly serious. Tell me the truth. Who are you really? And how did Malachi Finch convince you to step into this viper's nest? Vida's defenses crumbled. She told Seren everything. Her father's failed business, her family's debts, Rafferty's desperate schemes, the way Malachi had promised that one evening would solve their problems. She spoke of the carriage ride, the Duke's silence, the words she'd overheard. She cannot be my bride. Seren listened without interruption, her expression shifting from curiosity to sympathy to determination. Malachi Finch, she said when Vida finished, is a cockroach in human form. This is exactly his style. Create chaos and disappear. But why would he think this would work? Because Caius needs someone. Serene's voice softened. Our father died 8 months ago, suddenly, horribly. Caius was in Scotland when it happened. He didn't make it back in time to say goodbye. Vida's chest tightened. I'm sorry. He's been a ghost ever since, going through the motions, feeling nothing. Grandmother thinks marriage will fix him. She's been throwing Lady Honoria at him like a weapon. But Honoria would destroy what's left of him. And your grandmother can't see that? Grandmother sees only duty. Seren leaned closer. But you, Miss Ashford, have just given my brother something he hasn't had in months. What's that? A reason to fight. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and the Duke appeared in the doorway. Seren, leave us. Caius, now. Seren squeezed Vida's hands once and swept from the room. The Duke closed the door, exhaustion visible in every line of his body. I see my sister has been recruiting you to her cause. She's been kind, Vida said carefully. Serene collects people. She'll wrap you in warmth and convince you that fairy tales are possible. He moved toward the fire. They aren't. I know that. Do you? His gray eyes were sharp. Do you understand what staying here means? The scrutiny, the cruelty? Your sister explained the arrangement she's proposing. And what did she propose? Vida lifted her chin. That I pretend to be your potential match. That in exchange, my family's circumstances are improved, and my future is secured when this ends. When it ends, he repeated the words flatly. And you'd agree to this? I've been surviving my whole life, Your Grace. This is just survival in better clothes. Something flickered in his expression. Reluctant respect. He was silent for a long moment. 3 conditions, he said finally. If you stay, you follow 3 rules without exception. Vida stood, facing him as an equal. Name them. First, you never speak to my grandmother alone without my knowledge. She'll try to break you. Agreed. Second, you tell me immediately if Lady Honoria or anyone else threatens you directly. Agreed. And third, he hesitated. You never mistake this arrangement for something it isn't. Whatever my sister implies, whatever moments may pass between us, and this is a transaction. Nothing more. The words stung more than they should have. I'm not naive enough to confuse performance with reality, Your Grace. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Tomorrow, my grandmother will interrogate you. Be prepared." "I have nothing to hide." He glanced back, something almost human in his expression. "Everyone has something to hide, Miss Ashford. The question is whether yours will destroy us both." He left without another word, and Vida sank onto the settee. She should run. She should find a way home, face whatever consequences awaited. Instead, she thought of her mother's tired eyes, her brother's debts, the endless gray road of poverty stretching before her. And she thought of the Duke's face as he'd stood by the fire, exhausted, guarded, carrying a grief he couldn't name. "She cannot be my bride," he'd said. But as Vida climbed into the impossibly soft bed, she found herself wondering, not hoping, just wondering, whether fate might have other plans. The Dowager would interrogate her tomorrow. Lady Honoria would try to destroy her. And Vida Ashford, merchant's daughter from Whitmore, would fight them all. Not for the Duke, for herself. Morning arrived with birdsong and fresh flowers, both so foreign to Vida's usual waking that for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed back. The carriage, the Duke's words, the arrangement, and she sat upright, pulse quickening. Sunlight streamed through windows overlooking gardens that stretched toward distant woods. The fire had been rebuilt while she slept. Fresh water steamed in a porcelain basin. A breakfast tray sat on the writing desk, laden with more food than her family would eat in a day. This was her life now, at least for a while. Vida rose and moved to the window, pressing her palm against cool glass. Below, gardeners moved between hedgerows. A stable boy led horses toward distant paddocks. Everything was so normal. A knock broke her reverie. "Miss Ashford?" Tansy's voice. "May I help you dress? Lady Seren has requested your company for breakfast." Tansy helped her into a day dress in soft sage green that fit surprisingly well. "Lady Seren raided her own wardrobe," Tansy explained. "She said you'd need proper attire to face the wolves." "Everyone keeps calling them wolves." "Because that's what they are, miss." Tansy's expression grew serious. "Anyone new is a threat. Anyone different must be eliminated." They walked through corridors that seemed endless, each one grander than the last. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Ravenswood staring down with imperious expressions. One portrait made her pause. A young man, perhaps 30, with the Duke's dark hair, but warmer eyes. He stood beside a woman in a silver gown, her hand resting on his arm with obvious affection. They looked happy. "The late Duke and his wife," Tansy said quietly. "His Grace's parents. She died when Lady Seren was born. He never recovered." Vida studied the painted face, the gentle humor, the softness in his gaze. This was Caius's father. The man whose death had transformed his son into the cold stranger she'd met. "He looks kind," she murmured. He was. The house was different when he was alive, warmer. Now it's all duty and the Dowager's endless plans. The small dining room was paneled in pale wood and flooded with morning light. Seren sat alone at a table laid for two. "You survived the night." She rose to embrace Vida. "I was worried grandmother might send assassins. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be." Seren poured chocolate into a delicate cup. "Grandmother has requested your presence in her sitting room at 11 o'clock. Vida's stomach dropped. So soon. She never waits when there's prey to corner. But Caius will be there. He won't let her destroy you completely." "Completely?" Serene's smile was sympathetic. "She'll try to break you. The question is whether you break cleanly or shatter." The chocolate was rich, but Vida barely tasted it. Her mind was racing ahead to the confrontation awaiting her. What should I tell her? The truth. Grandmother respects honesty. Lie to her, and she'll know instantly. And if the truth isn't enough? Then we improvise. Seren squeezed her hand. But remember this. You have something none of the other women paraded before my brother ever had. What's that? He chose to protect you. In that moment, when the carriage door opened, he could have thrown you to the wolves. Instead, he claimed you. That means something. The clock chimed 10. 1 hour until she faced the Dowager Duchess. 1 hour until the real test began. The Dowager's sitting room was a study in controlled elegance. Pale silk wallpaper, furniture arranged with military precision. It felt less like a private chamber and more like a throne room. The Dowager herself sat in a high-backed chair by the window, silhouetted against the morning light. She did not rise when Vida entered. She did not smile. Miss Ashford. The words were neutral, but the assessment in those gray eyes was anything but. Close the door. Sit. Vida obeyed, choosing a chair directly in the Dowager's line of sight. Running was not an option. The only path forward was through. My grandson tells me you arrived through Malachi Finch's machinations, the Dowager began, that you were promised your family's debts would be forgiven in exchange for your presence. Yes, Your Grace. And you agreed without knowing whose carriage you were entering? Mr. Finch was vague about the details. Vague. The Dowager's lips thinned. Tell me about your family. The complete truth. Vida forced herself to meet the older woman's gaze. My father was a merchant in Whitmore. Textiles. He built his business over 20 years. Then his partner embezzled everything and disappeared. My father tried to rebuild, but the debts were too great. He's been broken ever since. And your mother? Takes in mending. She's never complained. Siblings. A brother. Rafferty. He's the one who introduced me to Malachi Finch. Ah, the Dowager's expression sharpened. The brother is a schemer, then. He means well. He used you as currency to improve his position. That's not meaning well, Miss Ashford. The truth of the words lodged like a splinter. You're angry with him, the Dowager observed. Good. Naivety is forgivable. Willful blindness is not. Silence stretched between them. The Dowager rose, moving toward the window. I am going to tell you something I have told no one else. You will listen. You will remember. Veda's breath caught. Your Grace. My grandson blames himself for his father's death. The words fell like stones. Caius was in Scotland when the illness struck. A minor estate matter, something that could have waited. By the time word reached him, his father had only hours left. He rode through the night, nearly killed 2 horses, and still arrived too late. The Dowager's voice remained steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the window frame. The last words his father spoke were asking for him. And Caius wasn't there. Vida's chest clenched. He's punishing himself. He's drowning. The Dowager turned, and for the first time, Vida saw something human beneath the aristocratic mask. My grandson works 18 hours a day. He eats when reminded. He sleeps rarely. He has turned himself into a machine of duty because feeling anything else would require acknowledging what he's lost. And Lady Honoria would complete his transformation. She would marry his title, manage his estates, bear his heirs, and never once demand that he be present. She would let him disappear into obligation until there's nothing left. Then why push the match? Because I'm old. The admission seemed to cost her. Because I won't live forever, and I'm terrified of leaving him alone. Because duty has sustained this family for generations. And now? The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Now I see a merchant's daughter who speaks truth when lies would be easier. Who looks at my grandson not as a title to be acquired, but as a wounded creature to be understood. I'm not trying to. I know what you're not trying to do. The Dowager returned to her chair. The question is what you are willing to do. I don't understand. Make him feel something. Not love. That may be impossible. But something. Anger. Frustration. Even hatred. Anything that cracks through that armor. The dowager's gray eyes gleamed. Lady Honoria will never challenge him, but you already have. Vida thought of the carriage, of the Duke's fury when he realized what Finch had done. And if I fail, then at least you tried, which is more than I've been able to do in 8 months. The dowager rose, signaling that the audience was ending. One more thing. If you pursue this path, you will make enemies. Lady Honoria will try to destroy you. Others will follow. I understand. Do you? The dowager's voice softened. You're brave, but bravery alone won't protect you. She paused at the door. And if you hurt him, if you use his vulnerability for your own gain, I will destroy you so thoroughly that even your grandchildren will feel the shame. Vida stood, meeting the older woman's eyes. Perfectly understood, Your Grace. The dowager nodded once. Good. Now go. The wolves are waiting. The 3 days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Serene had taken charge with the enthusiasm of a general marshalling troops, declaring that Vida would need an entirely new wardrobe for the week's events, culminating in the grand ball. Grandmother brings the finest modiste in London, Serene explained, as a severe-faced woman named Madame Thérèse circled Vida with measuring tape. Anyone who's anyone attends. It's where reputations are made or destroyed. How encouraging, Vida muttered. The sapphire silk, the modiste declared, and the champagne with gold embroidery for the ball. She has the figure for drama. Between fittings, Serene coached her on society's unwritten rules. Lady Whitmore talks endlessly about her pugs. Feign interest for 3 minutes, then escape. If Lady Honoria approaches, never let her separate you from witnesses. The Duke himself remained frustratingly absent. Vida glimpsed him occasionally, crossing a hallway, riding toward the stables. He never approached her, but she sometimes felt his gaze from across a room, watchful and unreadable. He's avoiding you, Serene observed, which means you're having an effect. Or he regrets the arrangement. Caius always knows how to escape things. If he wanted you gone, you'd be gone. On the morning of the ball, Vida woke before dawn. She dressed and slipped through silent corridors, seeking the library Serene had mentioned, the late Duke's sanctuary. She found it easily. The room was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, comfortable chairs, and a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. She wasn't alone. The Duke stood by one window, still in evening clothes, a glass of something amber in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. You're up early, Miss Ashford. So are you. Or perhaps you never went to bed. Sleep and I have a complicated relationship. He turned, and she saw the shadows beneath his eyes. You've been preparing for tonight. Your sister has been thorough. Serene enjoys projects. He moved toward her. She's told you everything, I assume, about my father. The dowager told me as well. Ah, his expression flickered. And now you understand why I am the way I am. It makes it sadder. He stilled. Sadder. Grief is understandable. Punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault is just sad. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then he laughed, rough with disuse, but real. You're remarkable, he said. Every other person walks on eggshells around me. You simply say it. Would you prefer I pretended? No, I wouldn't prefer that at all. He moved closer, and she became aware of his height, his presence. He reached past her to pull a book from the shelf, a small volume bound in dark blue leather. This was my father's favorite. Collected letters between lovers, separated by war. He pressed the book into her hands. Take it. And tonight, when Lady Honoria tries to make you feel small, remember that you have something she never will. What's that? His eyes met hers, and in their gray depths, she saw something she couldn't name. The ability to make someone feel seen. He stepped back, the mask sliding into place. "Tonight will be difficult, Miss Ashford, but you won't face it alone." Then he was gone, and Veda stood in the morning light, clutching a book of love letters and wondering what she had gotten herself into. The ball was hours away. Everything was about to change. The ballroom of Thornhurst Manor blazed with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames reflected in crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls. Vida stood at the top of the grand staircase, wondering if it was possible to die of sheer terror. The champagne gown with gold embroidery fit perfectly. Serene had insisted on diamonds for her throat, borrowed, but real enough to make Vida afraid to move. "You look like a queen," Seren whispered beside her. "Honoria is going to choke on her own spite." Below them, society swirled in patterns of silk and whispered conversation. The dowager held court near the refreshment tables. Lady Honoria stood nearby in ice-blue satin, her smile sharp as she surveyed her domain. And there, standing apart with the unconscious authority of a man who owned everything in sight, was Caius. He wore black evening dress that made him look both elegant and dangerous. His dark hair was swept back, tension visible in his shoulders. Then he looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and something electric passed between them. He didn't smile, but something in his expression softened, and Vida felt courage bloom in her chest. She descended the staircase, and the whispers began immediately. "Who is she?" "The merchant's daughter. Can you believe it?" Caius met them at the bottom, offering his arm. "Miss Ashford, you look—" He paused, his composure wavering. "Adequate?" she supplied dryly. "Extraordinary." The word came out rough. "Shall we?" The crowd parted as they moved through the ballroom. Lady Honoria's smile had frozen. The dowager watched with narrowed eyes. "Everyone's staring," Vida murmured. "Let them. Tonight, we give them something worth staring at." The orchestra struck up a waltz, and Caius led her onto the dance floor. His hand settled at her waist, warm through the thin silk. "I should warn you," she said. "My dancing is merely competent. Then follow my lead, and stop thinking." "I beg your pardon?" "You're counting steps. Stop counting. Feel the music." She let the music guide her instead of her anxiety, let herself trust his lead, and gradually she felt herself relax. "Better," he said, warmth in his voice. "You're a natural." The music swelled toward its conclusion, and Vida became aware of how close they were, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "Caius, don't." His voice was strained. "If you say what I think you're going to say, I won't be able to maintain this pretense." The waltz ended. He released her with visible reluctance. Then Lady Honoria appeared at his elbow. "Your Grace. How delightful to finally claim your attention." She didn't acknowledge Vida. "Your grandmother has been asking for you." "Something about the announcement?" "There will be no announcement tonight," Caius said flatly. "How strange." She seemed quite certain. Lady Honoria's gaze flicked to Vida. "Perhaps Miss Ashford might excuse us?" "Miss Ashford is my guest. She excuses nothing." Lady Honoria's eyes widened. Surprise, then fury, quickly masked. "Of course. How protective." She linked her arm through Caius's. "Surely you can spare a few moments." She practically dragged him away, and Vida was left standing alone. "Don't let her see you falter." Seren appeared at her side. "She's testing you. Come. There are people you should meet." The next hour passed in a blur, but throughout, Vida was aware of Lady Honoria hovering near Caius, touching his arm, leaning close to whisper. Then the Dowager stepped onto the dais and raised her hand for silence. Distinguished guests, I have a most joyful announcement regarding my grandson's future. Vida's blood turned to ice. Caius wrenched his arm free from Lady Honoria's grasp. Grandmother, it is my great pleasure to announce that the Duke of Thornhurst has finally decided to choose a bride. The ballroom erupted. Lady Honoria's smile was triumphant. But the Dowager wasn't looking at Lady Honoria. She was looking directly at Veda, and while I cannot yet reveal her identity, the Dowager continued, I can assure you she is unexpected in the best possible way. Chaos, questions, exclamations, heads swiveling. Caius stood frozen, and Veda realized everything had just changed. The conservatory, Caius said through gritted teeth, appearing at her elbow. Now. He guided her through the chaos until they reached a glass-walled room filled with potted palms and the scent of earth. The door closed, muffling the noise, and Caius turned to face her with something like desperation. I didn't know she was going to do that, I gathered. She's forcing my hand. Now the entire ton believes I've chosen someone. He ran his fingers through his hair. If I don't produce a bride by season's end, I'll be a laughingstock. You could still choose Lady Honoria. No. The word came out harsh. I told you. I cannot marry her. Why? He stilled, his back to her, because she would complete my destruction, and some part of me still wants to survive. Veda moved toward him slowly. Your grandmother told me about your father, about the guilt you carry. Did she? His voice was flat. And what did she expect you to do with that information? She expected me to help you. He laughed, that same broken sound. And you agreed? You, who owe me nothing? I agreed because I understand. He turned. Understand what? Loss, guilt. The way it hollows you out until you're just going through the motions. Veda's voice cracked. When my father lost everything, I watched him disappear, and I blamed myself. How could you blame yourself? I was 17, old enough to notice the signs. His partner had been stealing for months. There were discrepancies I might have caught, but I was too focused on dresses and dances. She wrapped her arms around herself. My father lost his life's work, and I was dreaming about ribbons. The silence between them felt different now, charged with shared vulnerability. You're not responsible for your father's partner's theft, Caius said quietly. And you're not responsible for an illness that struck when you happened to be away. That's different. Is it? He closed his eyes. I should have been there, he whispered. He was calling for me. His last words were my name, and I was miles away. Did he love you? The question caught him off guard. What? Your father. Did he love you? More than anything. Then do you really think his last thought was anger? Or do you think he was calling your name because he loved you, and you were the last person he wanted to think of before the end? Something cracked behind his eyes. I never thought of it that way. Maybe it's time you did. They stood there in the moonlit conservatory, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with arrangements. Caius reached out and traced his thumb along her cheekbone. You see me, he murmured. Not the title. Just me. Is that so strange? No one has seen me in years. He kissed her. Not a formal gesture. This was real. Raw. His mouth claiming hers with intensity that stole her breath. Her hands found his lapels, clinging as the world tilted. When they broke apart, both gasping, his forehead rested against hers. This wasn't supposed to happen, he breathed. I know. This changes everything. I know. Vida. Her name on his lips felt like a prayer. I don't know how to do this. I've been dead inside for so long. Now you're not. He kissed her again. Softer, but no less devastating. Tomorrow, We need to talk. Really talk. And tonight? His smile was the first genuine one she'd seen. Tonight, we return to the ball and let them wonder. He took her hand and led her back toward the lights and music. Everything had changed, and Veda wasn't sure if she should be terrified or elated. Perhaps both. The morning after the ball dawned gray and cold, matching the ice in Vida's chest. She had barely slept. She rose early and was making her way toward breakfast when she heard voices, sharp, angry. Lady Honoria's voice cut through the stillness. Arranged this deliberately. The Dowager assured me the announcement would name me, and instead, she publicly humiliates me by suggesting he's chosen that merchant's daughter. Vida froze, hidden by a turn in the hallway. Lady Honoria, please. A man's voice, placating. Do you know who my father is? I will not be cast aside for some provincial nobody. The Duke hasn't made any formal declaration. I've wasted 2 years on that cold, grieving statue. And just when he finally thaws, some scheming fortune hunter steals everything I've worked for. I hardly think Miss Ashford is a fortune hunter. Of course she is. Lady Honoria's laugh was ugly. I want her investigated. Her family, her background, every scandal and secret. There must be something. And if there's nothing, then we create something. By the time I'm finished, Miss Veda Ashford will wish she'd never set foot in Thornhurst Manor. Veda sagged against the wall, trembling. She should find Caius, tell him what she'd heard. But doubt crept in. Was she really what he needed? Lady Honoria had been right about one thing. Vida had appeared from nowhere and inserted herself through Malachi Finch's scheming. She had brought him nothing but trouble. She rounded the corner and nearly collided with the Dowager. Miss Ashford, you look troubled. I overheard Lady Honoria. She's planning to investigate my background. Ah. The Dowager's expression didn't change. And this surprises you. She said if she can't find something damaging, she'll create it. She can't. Not if you're under my protection. Your protection? I announced that my grandson would choose a bride. I wanted to see how Honoria would react. The Dowager's smile was thin. She's revealed herself magnificently. Then perhaps I should leave. The words emerged before she could stop them. The Dowager's expression flickered. Disappointment. Is that what you want? I want to stop causing problems. I want Caius to have peace. And what about what you feel for my grandson? Feelings aren't enough. Tears spilled over. Lady Honoria was right. I'm no one. Caius deserves someone who makes him feel alive. That someone is you. But the seed of doubt had taken root. I need time, Veda whispered, and fled. Caius found her in the gallery, crying among the portraits. Veda, what's happened? I can't do this. The words tore out of her. I can't stay and pretend this will work. Someone like you? A merchant's daughter. A problem that Malachi Finch dumped in your lap. Honoria? His expression darkened. What did she say? It doesn't matter. She's right. She's never been right about anything. He reached for her. Vida, look at me. She looked and saw hope and fear and something that looked like love. You see me, he said softly. You see the broken man instead of the Duke. Don't. She pulled away. Don't say something we can't take back. Why not? Because when this ends, I need my heart intact. Silence. So that's your decision. You're leaving. I'm protecting us both. You're running. You don't understand, she said sharply. You've never been powerless. You've never glimpsed everything only to have it snatched away. He watched her for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Very well. 2 hours later, she was in a hired carriage, watching Thornhurst Manor disappear. The last thing she saw was a figure at an upper window. Tall, dark-haired, motionless, watching her leave. Home was exactly as she'd left it, and somehow that made everything worse. Her mother asked no questions, simply held her while she cried. Her father shuffled in, saw her face, and shuffled out again. Rafferty appeared on the third day, full of excuses. "Don't," she said flatly. "Don't explain. Don't apologize. I thought it would help. You didn't think to ask me?" Silence. "I could have been ruined. Instead, I was—" She couldn't finish. What had she been? Protected. Seen. Kissed by a man who looked at her like a miracle. And she had thrown it away. "What happened?" Rafferty asked quietly. "I fell in love. And I ran away because I was too scared to believe it could be real." Her mother appeared with an envelope. "This came for you. The seal looks important." The Ravenswood crest, pressed in dark blue wax. "Miss Ashford, Caius refuses to write. He says you made your choice. I am not so restrained. You are making a mistake. My grandson loves you. He admitted it after you left. You have 1 week. After that, Lady Honoria's family will pressure for an engagement. Is that what you want? A man who finally learned to feel again, locked into a loveless marriage because the woman who woke him up wasn't brave enough to stay. Come back. Fight for him. The Dowager Duchess of Thornhurst. He loves you. Veda?" Her mother's voice seemed distant. "What does it say?" "It says I'm a coward. It says I ran away from the best thing that ever happened to me. Were you afraid?" "Terrified." Her mother sat beside her. "When your father lost his business, I wanted to disappear. But running doesn't make the fear go away. What matters enough to face it?" Vida thought of Caius, his broken laughter, his father's letters, the way he'd looked at her. She thought of Lady Honoria circling like a vulture. He matters. He matters enough. "Then why are you still sitting here?" A knock at the door. Rafferty answered and returned bewildered. "There's a carriage outside, with a crest, and a woman who says she's—" Serene swept past him. "Oh, thank God." She pulled Veda into an embrace. "You ridiculous woman. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I was scared." "Of course you were scared, but you don't run from fear." Seren gripped her shoulders. "My brother hasn't stopped drowning since you left. He loves you. So stop being a martyr and come fight for your happy ending." Vida looked at her mother, who was smiling through tears. "Go. Don't look back." She packed a single bag and climbed into the Ravenswood carriage. "One question," she said. "How angry is he?" Seren's smile gleamed. Furious. Heartbroken. Perfect. Thornhurst Manor looked different in the fading light. Softer, somehow. Seren led her through the servants' entrance. "The house party ended yesterday. Most everyone has departed. But Lady Honoria and her family remain. And Caius? In the library. He doesn't know you're coming." The library doors loomed ahead. "What if he won't forgive me?" "He'll forgive you." Seren gave her a gentle push, and the door swung open. The room was dim. Books lay scattered everywhere. And there, in the center of the chaos, sat Caius. He looked terrible, unshaven, disheveled, exhausted. The book of love letters lay open in his lap. "I said I didn't want to be disturbed, Seren." "It's not Seren." His head snapped up. Shock, hope, anger, desperation, pain, all crossed his face. "Veda." "Hello, Caius." He rose slowly. "You left." "I did. You told me you couldn't do this. I said a lot of things. Most of them were lies I told myself because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of wanting something I couldn't have. Of loving someone I didn't deserve." She moved closer. "I was so convinced this had to end badly that I ended it myself. And now? Now I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of living without you. I would never marry Honoria." Your grandmother said. My grandmother said what she needed to bring you back. His hand covered hers. There was never any possibility of me marrying Honoria Vance. Why not? He lifted her hand to his lips. Because after you, there's no one else. You ruined me for anyone else the moment you looked at me and saw the broken man. Caius, I love you. The words came out rough. I should have said it before you left. I should have fought harder. Of what were you scared? Of wanting something and losing it. Everyone I've ever loved has left me. His free hand cupped her face. So when you ran, part of me thought, of course, they always leave. I'm not leaving. Never again. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her, deep, desperate, tasting of tears and relief. We need to talk to your grandmother, Veda said shakily. Later. Right now. I just need to hold you. They found the dowager in her sitting room, Lady Honoria standing before her with barely contained fury. Unacceptable. My father will hear of this. She broke off, seeing them hand in hand. Miss Ashford, I thought you'd fled. I had the cowardice to flee, Veda corrected, but I found my courage again. Trapping a duke with your schemes, that's enough. Caius's voice cut through. Miss Ashford has trapped nothing. I'm the one who asked her to stay. Asked? The dowager's eyebrow rose. And now, I'm going to marry her. Stunned silence. Marry her? Lady Honoria's voice rose. She has nothing. She's everything. He looked at his grandmother. I only care if you approve, grandmother. The dowager was silent. Then, slowly, she smiled. I said once that Miss Ashford reminded me of your mother. Bold. Honest. She took Veda's hands. Welcome to the family. Lady Honoria made a sound of fury and swept from the room. No one watched her go. The wedding of the Duke of Thornhurst and Miss Veda Ashford was the scandal of the season. Every newspaper printed the story. Every drawing room buzzed with speculation. A merchant's daughter, elevated to duchess. It was either the greatest romance of the age or the most spectacular mistake in aristocratic history. Vida didn't care which. She stood in the gallery of Thornhurst Manor, now officially her home, surrounded by portraits of Ravenswoods, who had watched her journey from terrified interloper to beloved bride. You're going to wear a hole in the carpet. Serene appeared beside her, resplendent in rose silk. I keep expecting to wake up, Vida admitted. If it were a dream, I wouldn't have a blister from those ridiculous shoes grandmother insisted I wear. Serene linked her arm through Vida's. It's real. You're a duchess. And my brother hasn't stopped smiling since you said I do. Serene. What? It's true. She squeezed Veda's arm. I'm glad you came back. I'm glad you're my sister now. Veda blinked back tears. I'm glad too. Now come on. Your husband is looking for you. Your husband. The word still felt impossible. But when Vida entered the great hall and saw Caius waiting, his face transformed by joy. The impossibility became natural. There you are. He pulled her into his arms. I thought you'd gotten lost. In my own house? Never. Our house. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. Our home. The dowager appeared. The carriage is ready. You'll miss your departure if you keep making eyes at each other. Grandmother, don't grandmother me. I've arranged a wedding breakfast, coordinated 300 guests, and personally silenced Lady Honoria's father during the ceremony. I have earned the right to hurry you along. But her eyes were soft. Now go. Be happy. The carriage stood waiting, festooned with ribbons. Serene cried as she hugged Veda goodbye. The dowager nodded once, but Veda caught the glisten in her eyes. And then they were inside the carriage, the door closing, the horses beginning their journey toward Cornwall. Vida leaned against her husband's shoulder and felt him press a kiss to her hair. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, deliriously. "Even though everyone thinks I've lost my mind? Let them whisper." She tilted her face up. "I have everything I ever wanted." "And what was that?" "You. This. A life where I'm not just surviving, but actually living." She traced her fingers along his jaw. "When I climbed into this carriage that first night, I had no idea what was about to happen. I just heard you say something through the window. What did I say?" She smiled. "She cannot be my bride." Caius stilled. "You heard that?" "Every word. You sounded so certain. And I thought, whoever he's talking about, she cannot possibly be his bride. I was talking about Lady Honoria, trying to convince myself I could keep fighting grandmother's plans." He pulled her closer. "And then the door opened, and there you were, completely out of place. No, you were exactly where you were supposed to be." The carriage rocked gently as it traveled the country roads. Outside, the English countryside rolled past in green and gold. Inside, Vida Ashford, now Vida Ravenswood, Duchess of Thornhurst, rested her head against her husband's shoulder and let her eyes drift closed. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was home. 1 year later. The opera house blazed with light and music, and Vida settled into the Ravenswood family box with a contented sigh. Beside her, Caius adjusted her wrap with absent tenderness. "Do try to stay awake this time," he murmured. "I understand the second act is riveting. I make no promises. Your shoulder is very comfortable." It had become their joke, the story of how they met. The Duchess literally fell asleep on the Duke before they were introduced. The gossips loved it. They didn't know the half of it. As the overture swelled, Vida let her head rest against Caius's shoulder. Not to sleep, though pregnancy made her tired at odd times, but simply to feel him beside her. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, even when you snore." "I do not snore." "You absolutely snore. Delicately, but definitely snoring." She elbowed him gently, and he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. The music swelled. Vida's eyes drifted closed, and when she woke, half an hour later, her cheek pressed against expensive wool and cedar. Caius was watching her with pure, unguarded love. "The soprano was transcendent," he said dryly. "You missed the entire third act. Tell me about it tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she repeated, and pulled him down for a kiss that made the society matrons gasp. Let them gasp. Let them whisper. The Duke of Thornhurst had found his bride in the most impossible way, and they lived, against all expectations, happily ever after.